This week on the show, we are talking about a billion, yes, with a B, $1 billion problem. Truck parking. That's coming up next. Let's go.
Welcome to the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast.
And Jake, welcome to the show. Can you take just a second or two and introduce yourself to our viewers?
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Just real quick overview. My name is Jake Gusso. I am the co-founder of Rig Hut Truck Parking Technology. We focus on the industrial parking space. So we provide tools primarily to landlords to help them optimize their existing facilities, get a handle on inventory, access control, and promote the professional management of truck parking facilities.
All right, so that's Rig Hut, and we're going to have a link in the show notes down below for that. But why would I need a service like Rig Hut? Isn't parking, well, I'll say it lightly, isn't it readily available?
No, no. Parking is a tremendous problem. I mean, I think everybody knows that. Who knows what the actual, dollar value or quantity of shortage is? The statistic that always gets thrown around is that there's 11 drivers per legal parking space throughout the country.
Wow.
That's an old stat. In our anecdotal experience, it's way worse in, major coastal MSAs, right? South Florida, North Jersey, Southern California, it's probably worse. And then some areas in the middle of the country, it's probably not as bad. But overall, there's a tremendous shortage. In my humble opinion, that problem is going to be solved by the private sector. So root of the problem is we need more supply. It's got to get built. We got to convert, facilities that are available for truck parking. We got to open them up throughout the country.
And has anybody put a dollar value to this problem?
Again, dollar value that gets thrown around is about $200 billion. Tough to, if you try to do your own math, you can arrive there, but you're making a lot of assumptions. And I always just say it's a giant problem that impacts basically everybody in the country.
And John and I are both in the safety world of trucking, and I certainly see an impact when drivers are using personal conveyance on their ELD system as they are looking for parking spots. And quite often, separate topic, we won't get into this, they use PC incorrectly on their ELD, but it starts off frequently as a journey looking for a place to park. How does Big Hut, HUT, help solve the problem?
Yeah, so Rig Hut, I'll tell you a little bit more about me. I've spent my whole career in the real estate business, basically. So I started out in property management, retail stuff. So shopping centers, apartment buildings, and office assets, primarily here in South Florida. That grew into a brokerage career. And then, we started buying distressed assets in the Midwest and operating those. So basically, I've spent the last decade on the real estate side of the equation. The original idea behind Rig Hut was really a real estate play, right? So we were going to actually solve the supply problem directly. We convinced a couple of local landlords down here in Miami to let us operate their yards on their behalf. So we were basically a third-party management company. Our thesis was this is going to be a great way to actually get, boots on the ground, see the problem firsthand, and try to solve those problems from a first-person perspective. So as we started scaling the management business, we were looking for a tool that would help us automate inventory, right? So we were keeping track of all this information in a giant Google sheet, 800 parking spaces, manually tracking who's in, who's out. Did someone pay? Did someone not pay? What's their gate code? All this stuff. And obviously it became real tedious. And there wasn't a solution that was available at the time. So this was, towards the end of the pandemic in early 2021. So we started building out the tool for ourselves initially. First thing we built was the ability to just facilitate a transaction. So instead of, me trying to get a guy to Zelle me or Venmo me or, bring a check and someone have to physically be in the yard, right? We were like, hey, let's move this online. So that was the first thing we built. And then over time, given the experience that we've had managing other types of real estate, we knew what the application was supposed to look like, right? So we kind of just built it for ourselves, and then it just took off, right? We started gathering feedback from other landlords, and then the software platform kind of took over the management business. And so how does RigHut help directly? There's a perceived headache from a lot of landlords, especially the larger institutional ones associated with managed truck parking, right? All else being equal, that landlord is going to prefer a single lease, a single relationship with a company like JB Hunt or Ryder, right? Someone that's got institutional grade credit. They don't necessarily want to be, have the operational burden of 100, 200, 500 different tenants in a single facility. So RigHut gives them the ability to have a similar relationship, right? Where we're automating a lot of the manual processes that go into managed truck parking, and we automate the pay flows, which are obviously very important to the landlord because these guys are taking a lot of risk and putting up a lot of money uh, to get these facilities open. So we're making yards more efficient, right? We're reducing labor costs, and we're incentivizing landlords that would otherwise not consider opening these yards to make them available to the driver community. And specifically geared more towards the owner operator, right? The guy that maybe's got, 1 to 5 trucks, right?
Right.
That's a lot more limited than space for a larger carrier, right? If you're a landlord, you're basically competing against other landlords to get those large carrier relationships.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Well, I was going to say, and this gives them the ability that I don't need to have my truck parking at the house. I can have it in a central location, create that more of a business atmosphere to say, yeah, my yard is here, my trucks are here. And, I might have even extra space for equipment and stuff.
Yeah. Especially from a security standpoint, right? I always talk about South Florida because it's my backyard, but you are not allowed to park a truck at your house down here, anywhere in Dade County. Sometimes you can get away with it if you're in a more, it's tough for me to even call it rural because there's so little land down here, but there's a section of Dade County where you could probably get away with it for a short amount of time. But you want to park your asset that's, you're living in a place that is secure and right. And that's what we're promoting at RigHut. We're giving landlords the ability to make these facilities, true, operations. If that makes sense.
Sure.
when I'm looking at the platform, one of the things I notice is that you've got a pay system and you've got a gate code system. So can I assume that if I didn't make my monthly payment, if that's the way it works, then my gate code is no longer active?
So we actually no longer work with gate codes. We built a piece of hardware ourselves that integrates direct with the gate operator, right? The actual gate motor, and that allows drivers to open the gate straight from their phone. So there's no more gate code, right? You don't have to remember the gate code. People also cannot give out the gate code because we're verifying who's at the gate using their mobile phone number. Unless you're giving somebody else your cell phone, only you or your authorized user will be allowed in the facility. Yes, so drivers get the convenience of being able to open the gate from their phone. Landlords get the convenience of not having to go down and swap all their access codes if they have an issue, right?
Sure.
That's sorry, you just removed in my mind a huge headache. If I was a landlord, right?
That's the intent.
Simplified the process. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what is your main target? Is it long-term parking, like John mentioned, owner operator, for example, needing a place to park, or is it short-term overnight spots?
It depends on the market and the facility, right? So most of our customers operate primarily monthly parking facilities with a subset of overnight parking. We do not currently have direct relationships with the travel stops or travel centers, for example, if that's your question. These are what we call, we differentiate the travel stops from what we call managed parking. So our ICP is what we call it, ideal customer profile, is a managed parking operator. and primarily geared towards monthly. But something I always tell landlords, like we get a lot of discovery requests, right? Demos of guys that are looking to invest in outdoor storage and managed parking. And they ask a similar question, like, should I operate a overnight facility or should I operate, a facility that's more geared towards monthly parking? And my response is always, the market's going to tell you what you should optimize for. So for whatever reason, like we could have, two of our customers a mile apart from each other on the same street, similar level of amenities, similar levels of access, right? And for whatever reason, one of them gets a ton of overnight business and one of them gets a ton of monthly business. I can't tell you why, but the market tells you what you should optimize for.
Yeah, well, makes sense. And you mentioned the other part of it, I think, amenities. So
Yes.
if I was a monthly truck parking lot, I don't think I need a restaurant and washrooms and some of the other things that overnight facilities would almost demand, I would think.
That's correct. But again, market specific, right? Like, unfortunately, I always pick on South Florida, but the supply demand imbalance is so exacerbated that you can basically do whatever you want, right? As long as you have a fence, a gate, and a parkable surface, you're going to get overnight traffic simply because that's better than parking on the shoulder or the on
Right.
or off ramp of a highway, right?
Sure.
If you go to like DFW, there's a lot of land out there. Parking rates are not, they're about average. So they're between $150 and $200 a month and somewhere around $17 to $20 a day. There's a lot of land. So over there, operators are competing against each other. So you'll see, overnight parking facilities with movie theater, driver lounge, free Wi-Fi, restaurant, showers, the whole nine.
Sure.
And down the street, if you've just got fence gate lights, the other guy's going to fill up way faster than you.
Yeah, well, at my age, I'll tell you, I wouldn't be in a long haul truck today without a portable washroom. I can't sleep the
Yeah.
whole night anymore.
Yeah.
But, well, and that would allow me to use some of the facilities or some of the parking spaces that don't have all of the facilities and amenities that, a truck stop might have. Right. So you
Yeah.
are looking basically, as I understand it, for people who own land, have a fence facility with an automated gate of some sort, and want to allow truck parking on their facility.
Correct. And it not all yards have automated gates, right? Some of them just have a manual slide gate with a combo lock on it. And that could be fine in some areas. Like we have a customer outside of Nashville that leaves his gate completely open. And when we first met him, I was like, hey, do you have any issues with security or theft here? And he says, never. Gate's just wide open all the time.
Could I was going to say, could you utilize this parking as well for other vehicles, recreational vehicles, motorhomes, stuff along that line as well?
For sure. So pretty much in every yard, there's some subset of RVs, boat,
Cool.
sometimes cars, right?
Yeah.
But it's primarily, industrial parking stuff. It's the
Right.
semis, but it's the same kind of business, right? So like if you've got your yard laid out primarily for truck and trailer, right? Which the spaces are typically 70 or 75 feet long. But then you've always got like some odd portion of your site where you can't accommodate such a big piece of equipment.
Right.
So you'll lay out some shorter spaces, some 30-foot
Sure.
spaces, 40-foot spaces. So to the landlord, I mean, it doesn't particularly matter if it's a day cab or a sleeper or an RV,
Right.
occupies the
Right.
same amount of space.
Yeah,
Cool.
as long as they're paying the bill, what the heck? Well,
And I was going to say, it would be great to kind of fill those spots that may be unique or obscure type spaces and whatnot that you couldn't put a large tractor trailer in where you could put some smaller vehicles or something. So, but still make some revenue off that space by utilizing it for other vehicle types.
For sure. I mean, people talk about, if you're looking at truck parking, you're probably looking at RV and boat storage as well. Sometimes what guys can't really get a handle on is like your maximum parkable density. So it's not just you have a space that's 70 by 12 or 75 by 12. You need a drive aisle, right? Because that piece of equipment's got to maneuver, and then you've got other spaces, and you want to make sure those guys can get in and out. So if you've got, say, 5 acres and say it's perfectly rectangular, you're probably only parking on about half of that, maybe 60% of that. And then the rest is all drive aisles and dead space. So that, drives rates too, because the landlord's paying on 5 acres, not just the ports more people are parking on.
Right. Exactly.
Well, and this is one of the things I think truck owners forget is you're not just paying for that. I don't know what it is, 12 by 75. You're paying for the drive aisles and everything because that's what the landlord's got to cover his costs.
Yep.
Yeah.
And these things have gotten crazy expensive to build.
Oh yeah.
As you can imagine. I mean, everything's gotten crazy expensive to build, crazy expensive to insure.
Yep. Yeah. Is there opportunity from the landlord's perspective that maybe somebody owns an older piece of property, an industrial facility that has a building on it, but they have a large maybe parking area that can be utilized still and whatnot, or even the ability to transfer some of that building into inside storage?
For sure. I haven't seen the conversion to inside storage yet. Personally, I've heard of some guys that have done it. But yeah, we've got customers and we get prospects all the time that own, for example, abandoned malls or abandoned, old, I'm talking like 120-year-old distribution centers that have huge parking areas. And those are being converted to outdoor storage.
Cool.
Well, it would make sense. It's going to bring in revenue. And I don't think the revenue is small. If you can get 100 trucks on there, it's certainly going to cut your costs down.
Well, and it definitely makes some convenience for the, in the larger aspect, the motor carrier, right? So especially that guy who's got 5 trucks and I need a place, but I don't need anything fancy. I just need a place that's secure and, easily accessible.
For sure.
And I assume in most of these places, you're allowed to leave your car in your parking spot when you pull your tractor trailer out.
Yes. That's usually how it works. Come in the personal vehicle, pick up the truck, park the vehicle where the truck was, and then do the inverse when you're on the way out.
Right. Cool.
Because these smaller companies, a lot of the guys are pretty independent operators. When you're talking about a 5 or a 10 truck fleet, they're on the road an awful lot of time, unfortunately.
They are. I mean, that's one of the interesting things for me as well. Again, South Florida, an over-the-road driver is probably still paying for monthly parking, even though he's only here 5 days out of the month. And because he wants to know that he has a space when he gets home and he's not subject to paying, $35 a day at a truck stop that's, not as safe as the monthly parking facility might be.
Right.
So I think over time, as this business continues to sort of evolve and institutionalize, I think almost everything is going to go to pay based on usage. I think it's better for the landlord. It's probably better for the driver because you get to recycle some of those spaces, right? The over-the-road driver that's booking monthly parking, he's not there 25 days out of the month, or maybe it's 20 days out of the month, right? Instead of, we can reduce the rate based on usage. So instead of paying $35 a day at the truck stop, maybe it's $20 a day and everybody just pays $20 a day or $17 a day based on the time that you are actually in the facility. So you reduce some of that overhead for the owner operator. And if you do the math on the landlord side, as long as you can maintain occupancy, they're actually making more revenue.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say you could almost have if you had a couple of owner operators, say 1 truck each and whatnot, but they ran different schedules, they could almost team up and say, hey, we could better utilize this space. We'll rent it between the 2 of us. I'm home on Mondays and Tuesdays. You're home on Fridays and Saturdays. Cool. No, we're not going to be at the same time, but we can better utilize that space and split the cost.
Some of them do that.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. They would need a spot though, John, for their personal vehicle to park outside of
Right.
the truck spot. Right.
Well, either that or swap keys so you can move my car.
Exactly.
Well, and I mean, some of these cars, I forget what brand it was, where for a while there, they were advertising digital keys that I could send to Jake a digital key and he can hop
Oh,
into
wow.
my car now.
Wow. That's interesting.
Commercial.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was going to say one of the other advantages with this program is particularly for small owner operator fleets and whatnot, the insurance providers are always wondering, where are you parking that truck and trailer? Is it safe? You know, do you have a place other than just parking it in on the street or in a shopping mall down the road or whatnot? Now you can be able to provide true evidence to say, yeah, here's the company I'm working with, and they can provide details on the security of the facility and yada yada yada.
Yeah, that happens all the time, and in my opinion, Rig Hut makes their lives a lot easier for that specific use case, right? Because you get a PDF copy of your reservation agreement. It lays out the level of amenities at the facility. It lays out, you've got a dedicated parking space. And so instead of, having to go back and forth and finding the DocuSign that you executed, 3 months ago that you're never going to look at again, it makes your life a little bit easier.
No doubt.
I love it. Sorry, I just had to move you out of the way, Jake, so I could show your co-founder there on the website. But I cut
Yes,
your
sir.
head off doing it. But hey, Jose needs equal billing, I think.
Yes, he does.
Well, hey, if he's a co-founder, damn, he should be here too.
Yeah.
100%.
Just out of curiosity, does Jose do interviews?
He does occasionally, and the way we Jose and we've known each other basically our entire lives. His brother has been one of my best friends since I was, I don't know, 9 or 10 years old. So we grew up with each other. Jose's a couple years older than me, but Jose's background is more on the technology side. He's actually built a couple of software companies in the past. That's kind of our, there's really no division of responsibility because we both do everything at a startup. But yes, he does occasionally. We should do another one all together.
There you go. And how long has Rig Hut been in business?
2021 was when we said, okay, there's something here. Let's incorporate and try to make a business out of this. It's evolved over time, right? Management company, then it was just transaction software. Then we built out the landlord suite of tools, and it's still evolving, right? So we've got a lot of stuff on the roadmap, and I'm sure if we talk again a year from now, the business will look similar, but probably different as well.
Yeah,
Sure.
I just took your face away from it because I wanted our viewers and listeners to see the map that you've got pretty good coverage at the moment. And I'm sure it's continuing to grow.
It is. So that map
Is outdated.
Believe it or not, some of our landlords do not want their sites advertised.
Makes sense. Sure.
So there's a few different reasons for it. That map is, landlords that elect to have their site listed on the platform. They show up on the pin. In terms of our size right now, we just recently crossed over a couple hundred facilities. So
Cool.
we are growing and continuing to grow, and we're continuing to grow faster, which is always good for us, right? Sometimes small business startup, you always feel like you're moving too slow, but you look back 12 months and you're like, yeah, we did all right.
Sure.
You said you're well over 100 facilities. Do you got any idea how many parking spots that is?
No, I just got asked this yesterday, and I should have done the research before we got on the call. But it's a lot.
You were with
in
a
the
great
tens.
question.
Yeah, it's in the tens of thousands parking space. The other thing about Rig Hut is, like, if you look at the marketplaces, which serve a different function, right? Those guys are providing visibility to parking facilities, and they're helping drivers find space. That's not what we do. If you look at the marketplaces, there's a lot of facilities on there that might be, 2 spaces behind McDonald's or something like that, which is great, right? We should add that to the availability pool, but that guy's not going to get utility out of Rig Hut, right? He probably has it all in his head. He doesn't even need a Google sheet.
Right.
The
Right.
yards that Rig Hut has are on the small side. I think our smallest yard has 45 spaces or so.
Okay.
And on the
Cool.
largest side, our largest single facility has 1,200 parking spaces. And then we've
Wow.
got a single customer that's got about 3,400 parking spaces just within his portfolio. So our stuff is really geared towards the operators that are trying to make a business out of truck parking.
Yeah. 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 Well, and I was going to say, sorry, that landlord is also going to have that. You're looking for the landlord that is also going to be able to maintain the facility, keep it clean, clear snow if that were the case, sweep the yard, whatever it be. But, because, yeah, you don't want it falling apart and, concerns of not so much security, but just, geez, I can't even get around. There's so much garbage laying around here. So,
Yes.
Yeah. Now, last question, because we're heading up. We got to wrap this up. On the map, there's not you're talking to two Canadians, eh, Jake? There's no
Okay.
Canadian location. Now, so my question is, and I don't, since this is software based, is there any barriers to a Canadian reaching out to Rig Hut and say, hey, can we work together?
Small barrier. So we've gotten a little bit of interest out of Canada just organically.
Right.
We haven't focused on Canada directly just because there's, we're still, again, startup and there's a lot of opportunity in the States. I know it's a big problem in Canada as well, and we've gotten some interest. The only barrier is we've got to set up a new subsidiary and a new payments, a merchant, right? Merchant ID. Then there's some additional complications on like payouts, right? So our payouts process is super dialed in and refined in the States. What we use for our current, processing stack doesn't allow for the same functionality in Canada. So there's some barriers, but it's not, a huge deal. I expect, we'll be able to help in Canada as well shortly.
Yeah, because about 40% of our viewership is Canadian, just so you know.
Awesome.
You're still talking mostly to Americans, but there's a significant portion that is Canadian, eh?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
So if you were a landlord and you have available truck parking of what, 50 or more is what you would ideally like, Jake? Would that?
I'd say if you've got, 2 acres or more.
Okay.
Okay. Cool.
If
Yeah.
you've got 2 acres or more and you want to turn it into a sleek operation, you should reach out to Rig Hut. Anyway, thank you, Jake, so much for coming on to the show this week.
Yes. Great.
Thank you guys for having me. It was a fun one.
Cute.
And Jake, thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it. And I would ask you to hit that like button. It really helps us know that one, you're getting value, and two, it spreads the word to other people. So please hit that like button. It's right there. We, John and I, would appreciate it very much. All right, that's it for this week. See you next week.